Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Now, this is a famous passage, and my guess is you've probably heard it before. But this verse also raises some questions. Like, what does it mean to delight in the Lord? And if we do that, will he actually give us the desires of our heart? You see, many take this verse as kind of like a personal promise. That if we delight in the Lord, if we just trust in him, he's going to give us what we want. And it's kind of like a name it and claim it verse that we use. Like, I'm going to delight in the Lord so that I can get whatever it is that I'm after in life. But the problem is, that's not what this verse is talking about. And so what I want to do is I want to look at this verse in context and see what it actually means. See how it actually applies to our life. Because I think there's some powerful truth in this verse for us today. But in order to understand it, we need to look a little bit closer at it. So let's start by looking at the context in which this verse is written. David wrote Psalm 37, and in this verse, what he's doing is he's comparing evildoers, worldly people, to godly people. And we see that he's contrasting their wickedness to God's people's righteousness. And what's happening in this verse is God's people are looking at these evildoers. They're looking at the world, and what they're seeing is they're looking at them, they're like, man, they are thriving. They seem to be doing good, and they're doing whatever they want to do. And then they're looking at their lives where they're struggling. They're trying to do what is right, but it doesn't seem like there's a reward, and they're kind of getting envious. They're like, these evildoers, they get to do whatever we want, and we're following these sets of rules, and it seems like we're missing out on all this fun. And what David is encouraging God's people to do is to look at the path that they're on. Not look at what's happening right now, but look at where that's leading in life. And what David is saying these evildoers, it might look good now, but they're on the path towards destruction. And you see, I think we fall into the same temptation today. We look at people who are doing whatever they want, and we think, man, what an incredible life they have. But we should pause and ask, what path are they on? Are their decisions, are their actions really leading to happiness? Because what the Bible is teaching, what Psalm 37 is saying, is it's saying, look at the long game. Does that kind of life produce life, or does it lead to death? Does doing whatever you want, whenever you want, produce happiness and lasting joy, or does it rob from you? You see, what David is encouraging us to do in this verse, when we look at the entire chapter in Psalm verse 34 or chapter 34, is he's saying, play the long game. Play the long game. Don't look at the short-term things that are happening. Look at the long-term things that are happening. And he's saying God's people are leading towards life. God is leading them towards life, towards joy, towards peace, towards happiness. God's promises are true. And even though in our limited view here and now, it might seem like the wicked are prospering, God is leading his people towards true life. All right, I want to look at this passage a little bit closer. So let's look at what Psalm 37 verse 4 means. And I want to break this down into two sections. We'll start by looking at what it means to delight in God. Now, to delight in something or someone is to get your joy from that thing. Is to look at it and be delighted, to be happy, to be joyful in it. And we delight in a lot of things, don't we? We delight in our relationships, in our spouse, in our kids, in our jobs, in maybe the social status we have. We delight in that food or that interaction or that entertainment. We delight in a lot of things in this world. And what this passage is saying that we should delight in God. And notice the contrast. Oftentimes we delight in these other things, and they're not necessarily bad things. It's not wrong to delight in your friends. It's not wrong to delight in your job. But rather than finding our delight in those things, we should delight in the one who gave us those things. Rather than worshiping the things we have in this life, we should worship the one who gave us those things. Because these things, Again, they're not necessarily bad, they're just not ultimate. Those things can't provide us true happiness. This psalm is telling us, is saying, delight in the Lord because he's the one who gave you these things anyway. And these good things should point us to the ultimate thing. So we should take delight in the Lord. We should find our joy in him. And what Psalm 37:4 is trying to tell us is that those things of this world, they can't ultimately satisfy us. They can't bring us lasting joy and happiness. So don't pursue these endlessly because they won't provide for you what they promised. Only God can do that. And that's where the second part of this verse comes in. We are to delight in the Lord, and the promise is if we do that, he will give us the desires of our heart. Now remember, we've already talked about how that doesn't mean God will give us whatever we want whenever we want it. This isn't that kind of promise. What Psalm 37:4 is saying, he's saying when we delight in the Lord, what we're doing is we're aligning our hearts, we're molding our hearts to his, so that our desires are the same as God's desires. You see, the reason that God doesn't give us whatever we want is that sometimes what we want is actually destructive for us. And because he's a good father, he's not going to give us something that's bad for us. Listen, sometimes my 5-year-old wants to play in the street, in a busy street. And as a good father, I'm not going to let him do that because that can be harmful for him. It can lead to pain and suffering. And so I keep him sometimes from what he wants to do for his joy, for his happiness, for his safety. And you see, sometimes what we desire in our hearts, what we long for, isn't actually good for us. And we can't understand it from our limited perspective, but God can see that. And he knows that what we want isn't always what's best for us. And so when we delight in the Lord, he starts shaping and molding our hearts to align with his, so that we desire what he desires. And what he desires for us is lasting joy that's not rooted in our circumstances. What he wants for you is peace that's not dependent on what's happening around you. What he wants for you is he wants you to be on the path that leads towards life, not on the path that leads towards destruction. And when you delight in the Lord, he will set you on that path and he will give you the desires of your heart because your heart aligns with his. So, how does this verse actually apply to our lives? I want to end by looking at how we can apply Psalm 37 verse 4 to our everyday lives. And again, we've seen this isn't a personal promise that God will give us what we want when we want it. Rather, what this verse is that God's not forgotten us. It's a promise that he's with us. It's a promise that even though it might seem like the people who do whatever they want, whenever they want, are thriving, that they're actually not on the path towards life. And it's a challenge for us to pursue God, to delight in him, because that will lead us ultimately to true life. And so my challenge for you today, this week, is when those things come up where you think, man, I need that. I need that shiny new thing. I need that new car. I need that new promotion. I need that relationship. I need that fame or that prestige or whatever it is that you need in your life, to pause. When those feelings come up, when those thoughts come up, pause. Think, do I really need that? Will that really lead me to life? Am I delighting in this thing, or am I delighting in God? Again, that's not to say we should never get the new phone. We should never pursue promotions. We should never, we shouldn't feel ashamed when money comes into our account. I'm not saying those things. What I'm saying is we shouldn't delight in those things. Those shouldn't be the ultimate goal in our life, because those things cannot ultimately satisfy. What we should do instead is delight in God. And when we get that relationship, when we get that extra zero in our bank account, when we get that promotion, when we get that thing that we enjoy, we should allow that to turn our attention to God. to delight in the one who gave us that thing, to align our desires with him. So the next time that you feel yourself being pulled to the things of this world, pause and reflect and remind yourself that ultimately it's God who will give you true, lasting joy and peace and happiness. So delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that it encouraged you and challenged you in your faith. If it did, would you like this video and also subscribe to this channel so that you can stay up to date on future content that's coming out? We'll see you next time.